Question 1. Process analysis reveals that China Mobile is planning to deploy a new AI-powered customer service chatbot that will collect and process customer interaction data, including personal preferences and potentially sensitive information, to provide personalized support. The development team is eager to launch the chatbot quickly to gain a competitive edge. What is the most appropriate course of action from a regulatory and ethical standpoint, considering the Personal Information Protection Law (PIPL) of the People's Republic of China? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive data protection impact assessment (DPIA) to identify and mitigate potential privacy risks before the chatbot is launched. Option B. Deploy the chatbot with basic security measures and assume that customers will understand and accept the data processing practices. Option C. Proceed with the launch and rely on customer complaints to identify and rectify any data privacy issues. Option D. Launch the chatbot immediately to capitalize on market opportunities and address any privacy concerns that arise after deployment. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive data protection impact assessment (DPIA) to identify and mitigate potential privacy risks before the chatbot is launched. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between rapid technological deployment and the need for robust data privacy and security, particularly within the context of China Mobile's operations. The company must balance innovation with its legal and ethical obligations to protect customer data. Careful judgment is required to ensure that new services do not inadvertently compromise user privacy or violate the Personal Information Protection Law (PIPL) of the People's Republic of China. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a proactive and comprehensive risk assessment aligned with the PIPL. This involves conducting a thorough data protection impact assessment (DPIA) before launching the new AI-powered customer service chatbot. DPIA is a mandatory requirement under PIPL for processing sensitive personal information or processing that poses a high risk to individuals' rights and freedoms. By systematically identifying potential privacy risks, evaluating their likelihood and impact, and implementing appropriate mitigation measures, China Mobile demonstrates a commitment to lawful data processing and safeguarding customer data. This aligns with the PIPL principles of legality, legitimacy, necessity, and integrity in data handling. An incorrect approach that involves launching the chatbot without a prior DPIA and relying solely on post-launch monitoring represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This directly contravenes the PIPL requirement for pre-launch assessments of high-risk data processing activities, demonstrates a disregard for the principle of data minimization and purpose limitation, as potential risks are not adequately considered or addressed upfront. Ethically, it exposes customers to potential data breaches or misuse without their informed consent or adequate safeguards, eroding trust. Another incorrect approach, which is to proceed with the launch and address any privacy concerns only if they are reported by customers, is also professionally unacceptable. This reactive stance is a clear violation of PIPL proactive data protection obligations. It places the burden of identifying and reporting privacy violations on the customer, which is contrary to the spirit and letter of data protection laws. This approach fails to uphold the duty of care owed to customers and can lead to severe legal penalties and reputational damage. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk management framework. This begins with understanding the specific data processing activities, identifying applicable regulations, in this case PIPL, and then conducting a thorough risk assessment. For activities deemed high risk, a DPIA is essential. This assessment should involve cross-functional teams, including legal, IT security, and product development. The process should culminate in the implementation of robust technical and organizational measures to mitigate identified risks, followed by ongoing monitoring and review. Transparency with customers regarding data processing practices is also a crucial element of ethical and compliant operations. Question 2. Cost-benefit analysis shows that adopting a new, unproven network management software could significantly reduce operational expenses by 15% within the first year. However, the software is developed by a relatively new vendor with limited track record and raises potential concerns regarding data privacy and compliance with China's cybersecurity regulations. What is the most prudent course of action for China Mobile? Option A. Immediately implement the new software to capitalize on the projected cost savings, assuming that any potential security or compliance issues can be addressed reactively as they arise. Option B. Implement the new software on a limited basis within a non-critical internal department to test its performance and security before considering a wider deployment, without a formal risk assessment of the vendor. Option C. Reject the new software outright due to the perceived risks, opting to continue with the current, more expensive system to maintain a known level of security and compliance. Option D. Proceed with the adoption of the new software after conducting a thorough due diligence on the vendor's security protocols and data handling practices, and ensuring the software can be integrated in a manner that fully complies with all relevant Chinese telecommunications and cybersecurity laws, with a phased rollout and robust monitoring. The correct answer is D. Proceed with the adoption of the new software after conducting a thorough due diligence on the vendor's security protocols and data handling practices, and ensuring the software can be integrated in a manner that fully complies with all relevant Chinese telecommunications and cybersecurity laws, with a phased rollout and robust monitoring. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate financial benefits of a new technology against potential long-term risks and compliance obligations within the specific regulatory environment of China Mobile's operations. The decision-maker must navigate the complexities of technological adoption, market competition, and adherence to China's telecommunications regulations, which often prioritize national security, data privacy, and fair competition. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a comprehensive risk assessment that includes not only financial returns, but also regulatory compliance, data security, and potential impact on existing infrastructure and customer trust. This aligns with the principles of responsible innovation and corporate governance expected of a major telecommunications provider like China Mobile. Adhering to the spirit and letter of Chinese telecommunications laws and internal company policies ensures that the adoption of new technology is sustainable, secure, and legally sound, thereby safeguarding the company's reputation and long-term viability. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the projected cost savings without adequately assessing the security vulnerabilities of the new technology would be professionally unacceptable. This failure could lead to significant data breaches, network disruptions, and severe penalties under China's cybersecurity law and other relevant data protection regulations. Another incorrect approach that neglects to consider the potential for vendor lock-in or the long-term maintenance costs associated with proprietary solutions would be short-sighted. This oversight could result in escalating operational expenses and reduced flexibility in future technology upgrades, contradicting prudent financial management and strategic planning principles. A third incorrect approach that bypasses internal review processes and seeks to implement the technology without proper stakeholder consultation, including legal and compliance departments, would violate corporate governance standards and increase the risk of noncompliance with internal policies and external regulations. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with clearly defining the problem and objectives. This should be followed by identifying and evaluating all potential solutions, considering a wide range of factors including financial, technical, operational, regulatory, and ethical implications. A thorough risk assessment, including scenario planning for potential negative outcomes, is crucial. Stakeholder engagement throughout the process, from initial assessment to final implementation, ensures that all perspectives are considered and that buy-in is secured. Finally, a robust monitoring and evaluation framework should be established to track the performance and impact of the chosen solution post-implementation, allowing for timely adjustments and continuous improvement. Question 3. During the evaluation of a new customer service enhancement initiative at China Mobile, which involves analyzing call logs and network usage patterns to predict potential service disruptions, a team proposes using this data without explicitly seeking additional consent from individual subscribers, arguing that the data is essential for improving service quality for all users and that existing terms of service cover such usage. What is the most appropriate course of action from a regulatory and ethical standpoint? Option A. Rely on internal company policies that permit the use of subscriber data for service improvement initiatives, assuming these policies are sufficient for compliance. Option B. Proceed with the data analysis based on the argument that the data is aggregated and anonymized and essential for service improvement, as outlined in the general terms of service. Option C. Utilize the data under the premise that broad terms of service agreements implicitly grant permission for all data usage aimed at enhancing service quality. Option D. Obtain explicit, informed consent from subscribers for the use of their call logs and network usage data for service enhancement purposes, clearly outlining the scope and benefits. The correct answer is D. Obtain explicit, informed consent from subscribers for the use of their call logs and network usage data for service enhancement purposes, clearly outlining the scope and benefits. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in navigating the ethical considerations and regulatory compliance surrounding the use of customer data within China Mobile. The core difficulty lies in balancing the company's business objectives, e.g., service improvement, targeted marketing, with the paramount importance of customer privacy and data security, as mandated by Chinese telecommunications and data protection laws. Misjudging this balance can lead to severe legal penalties, reputational damage, and erosion of customer trust. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes obtaining explicit, informed consent from customers before utilizing their data for purposes beyond core service provision. This aligns directly with the principles enshrined in China's cybersecurity law, CSL, and the Personal Information Protection Law, PIPL. These laws require clear notification to individuals about data collection, purpose, and usage, and generally necessitate consent for processing personal information, especially for secondary uses like marketing or service enhancement. By seeking consent, China Mobile demonstrates a commitment to transparency, customer autonomy, and adherence to legal data protection standards, thereby mitigating risks and fostering a trustworthy relationship with its subscribers. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves assuming that aggregated, anonymized data is inherently free from privacy concerns and can be used without further consent. While anonymization can reduce risk, the CSL and PIPL still impose obligations regarding data processing. If anonymization is not robust, or if re-identification is possible, using such data for new purposes without consent could still violate privacy regulations. Furthermore, the definition of anonymized data under Chinese law is specific and requires careful adherence to prevent accidental breaches of privacy. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on internal company policies that may not fully reflect the stringent requirements of current Chinese data protection legislation. Internal policies can be outdated or insufficient, and adherence to them does not absolve the company of its legal obligations. Relying on such policies without cross-referencing them against the CSL and PIPL represents a significant regulatory failure, potentially leading to non-compliance and legal repercussions. A third incorrect approach is to proceed with data utilization based on the assumption that broad terms of service agreements implicitly grant permission for all data uses. While terms of service are legally binding, they must be clear, conspicuous, and not overly broad in their scope regarding personal data processing. Vague or buried clauses are unlikely to be considered sufficient for obtaining informed consent under PIPL, which demands specificity regarding the purpose and scope of data usage. This approach risks being challenged as lacking genuine consent. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this context should adopt a risk-based, compliance-first mindset. Decision-making process should involve 1. Clearly identifying the type of data being used and its sensitivity. 2. Determining the specific purpose for which the data will be used. 3. Consulting relevant Chinese laws and regulations, CSL, PIPL, etc., to understand the legal requirements for that specific data type and purpose. 4. Evaluating whether explicit informed consent is required. 5. If consent is needed, designing a clear, transparent, and easily understandable consent mechanism. 6. Documenting all data processing activities and consent obtained. 7. Regularly reviewing and updating data handling practices to align with evolving legal landscapes and best practices. Question 4. The performance metrics show a significant dip in customer satisfaction scores for a newly launched value-added service. The marketing team is eager to push a promotional campaign to boost uptake, but the product development team has raised concerns about potential service disruptions due to the current network infrastructure's capacity limitations during peak hours. The head of sales is pushing for an aggressive marketing push, emphasizing the need to meet quarterly revenue targets. Which of the following actions best reflects a professional and compliant approach in this scenario? considering the regulatory framework governing China Mobile's operations. Option A. Prioritize the sales team's request and initiate the marketing campaign, while simultaneously requesting immediate, but potentially costly, network upgrades to mitigate anticipated disruptions. Option B. Launch a modified, less aggressive marketing campaign that highlights the service's benefits, but includes a disclaimer about potential temporary service interruptions during peak usage. Option C. Halt the promotional campaign immediately and conduct a comprehensive review of the network infrastructure's capacity and the service's technical feasibility before any further marketing efforts are considered. Option D. Proceed with the aggressive marketing campaign as planned to meet revenue targets, with a commitment to address any service issues reactively as they arise. The correct answer is D. Proceed with the aggressive marketing campaign as planned to meet revenue targets, with a commitment to address any service issues reactively as they arise. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between achieving ambitious business objectives and adhering to regulatory compliance and ethical conduct within the telecommunications sector in China. The pressure to meet performance targets, especially in a competitive market like China Mobile's, can tempt individuals to overlook or rationalize actions that might skirt regulatory boundaries or compromise ethical standards. Careful judgment is required to balance these competing demands. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough understanding and application of China's telecommunications regulations and internal company policies. This involves proactively identifying potential compliance risks associated with new service offerings and engaging relevant internal departments, such as legal and compliance, for guidance. This aligns with the principles of lawful operation and responsible business conduct mandated by Chinese regulatory bodies governing the telecommunications industry. It demonstrates a commitment to integrity and risk mitigation, which are foundational to sustainable business success and maintaining public trust. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate revenue generation without adequate regulatory review fails to uphold the principle of lawful operation. This could lead to violations of regulations concerning data privacy, service quality standards, or fair competition, potentially resulting in significant fines, reputational damage, and operational disruptions. Another incorrect approach that involves making assumptions about regulatory requirements or interpreting them in a self-serving manner is ethically unsound and legally risky. Such actions disregard the importance of due diligence and can lead to unintended noncompliance. A third incorrect approach that delays seeking expert advice or ignores potential red flags due to time constraints demonstrates a lack of professional responsibility and a failure to adhere to risk management best practices, which are implicitly or explicitly required by regulatory frameworks. Professional decision-making in such situations should involve a structured process. First, clearly define the business objective and the proposed course of action. Second, identify all relevant Chinese telecommunications laws, regulations, and internal company policies that might apply. Third, assess potential risks and compliance gaps associated with the proposed action. Fourth, consult with internal legal, compliance, and relevant subject matter experts to obtain clarification and guidance. Fifth, document the decision-making process and the rationale for the chosen course of action, ensuring it is compliant and ethically sound. Finally, implement the action with ongoing monitoring for compliance. Question 5. The audit findings indicate that a third-party vendor, engaged by China Mobile for customer service analytics, has been collecting and storing customer call metadata, including call duration and originating numbers, without explicit, granular consent for this specific type of data retention beyond immediate service provision. This practice, while intended to improve service quality metrics, has not been clearly communicated to customers in the privacy policy updates. Which of the following actions best addresses this situation in accordance with China's regulatory framework for data protection and cybersecurity? Option A. Immediately cease all data collection by the third-party vendor, conduct a full audit of all data collected to date, and revise the privacy policy to clearly outline all data collection and retention practices, seeking explicit consent for any continued collection of metadata. Option B. Inform the third-party vendor to delete all collected metadata and discontinue the analytics project, as the risk of noncompliance outweighs the potential benefits of service quality improvement. Option C. Instruct the third-party vendor to anonymize the collected metadata and continue the current collection and storage practices, as anonymization negates the need for explicit consent for retention. Option D. Continue the current data collection practices, while the internal legal team drafts a more general privacy policy update that broadly covers data analytics, assuming existing consent for service provision implicitly covers this metadata. The correct answer is A. Immediately cease all data collection by the third-party vendor, conduct a full audit of all data collected to date, and revise the privacy policy to clearly outline all data collection and retention practices, seeking explicit consent for any continued collection of metadata. Explanation: the audit findings indicate a potential breach of data privacy regulations concerning customer information handled by China Mobile. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing business operational needs with stringent legal and ethical obligations to protect customer data. The pressure to maintain service quality and competitive advantage must not override the fundamental right to privacy and the legal framework governing data handling. The correct approach involves a thorough investigation of the audit findings, a comprehensive risk assessment of the identified data handling practices, and the implementation of corrective actions that align with China's cybersecurity law, CSL, and relevant data protection guidelines. This approach represents best professional practice because it demonstrates a commitment to regulatory compliance, builds customer trust, and mitigates legal and reputational risks. Specifically, the CSL mandates strict controls over the collection, use, and storage of personal information, requiring organizations to obtain consent, ensure data security, and report breaches. Adhering to these principles is paramount. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the audit findings as minor or to implement superficial changes without understanding the root cause. This failure to conduct a proper investigation and risk assessment violates the CSL's requirement for organizations to take measures to safeguard the security of network operations, prevent the spread of illegal and harmful information, monitor and record network operation status, and deal with network security incidents. Furthermore, ignoring or downplaying potential breaches of customer data privacy can lead to significant fines, reputational damage, and loss of customer confidence, all of which are serious ethical and legal failures. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize business expediency over data security by continuing the identified practices without adequate mitigation, directly contravening the CSL's emphasis on data protection and the principle of lawful and legitimate data processing. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes compliance and ethical conduct. This involves 1. Acknowledging and thoroughly investigating all audit findings. 2. Conducting a detailed risk assessment, considering the potential impact on customers and the organization. 3. Consulting relevant legal and compliance experts to interpret regulatory requirements accurately. 4. Developing and implementing robust corrective action plans that address the root causes of the identified issues. 5. Establishing ongoing monitoring and review mechanisms to ensure sustained compliance and data security. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with both legal obligations and ethical responsibilities. Question 6. Regulatory review indicates that China Mobile is developing a novel AI-powered customer service platform that will collect and analyze user interaction data to personalize service offerings. While the technology promises enhanced customer experience and operational efficiency, it also introduces new considerations regarding data handling and service provision. Considering the regulatory landscape for telecommunications in China, which of the following approaches best ensures compliance and mitigates potential risks associated with the launch of this new platform? Option A. Proceed with the launch after a high-level review confirming the platform does not explicitly violate existing data privacy laws, assuming that any unforeseen issues can be addressed post-launch through minor adjustments. Option B. Prioritize the platform's market competitiveness and speed to market, deferring detailed regulatory compliance checks until after the service has gained significant user traction, at which point any necessary modifications can be implemented. Option C. Assume that the platform's innovative nature places it outside the scope of current regulations, and therefore, no specific regulatory review is necessary beyond general business ethics considerations. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive review of all relevant Chinese telecommunications laws, regulations, and meet guidelines pertaining to data collection, processing, user consent, network security, and service licensing, and proactively engage with legal and compliance teams to ensure the platform's design and operation are fully aligned with these requirements before launch. The correct answer is A. Proceed with the launch after a high-level review confirming the platform does not explicitly violate existing data privacy laws, assuming that any unforeseen issues can be addressed post-launch through minor adjustments. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the need for rapid innovation and the imperative to adhere to established regulatory frameworks governing telecommunications services in China. The pressure to launch new services quickly can tempt individuals to overlook or downplay potential compliance issues, especially when those issues are not immediately apparent or seem minor. Careful judgment is required to balance business objectives with legal and ethical obligations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough understanding and application of the relevant Chinese telecommunications regulations, specifically those pertaining to data privacy, network security, and service licensing. By proactively identifying and addressing potential regulatory gaps or conflicts before service launch, the company demonstrates a commitment to lawful operation and consumer protection, thereby mitigating future legal risks and reputational damage. This aligns with the principles of responsible corporate conduct and adherence to the rule of law as mandated by Chinese authorities. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on market competitiveness without adequate regulatory due diligence fails to acknowledge the stringent oversight by Chinese regulatory bodies such as the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, MIT. This oversight is designed to ensure that telecommunications services are provided in a manner that safeguards national security, public interest, and user rights. Ignoring these regulations can lead to significant penalties, service suspension, and severe reputational harm. Another incorrect approach that assumes existing regulations are sufficient without specific verification for the novel aspects of the new service is also professionally unacceptable. Innovation often introduces new use cases or data handling methods that may not be explicitly covered by older regulations, requiring a nuanced interpretation and potentially proactive engagement with regulators. This oversight can lead to unintended noncompliance. A third incorrect approach that relies on the assumption that regulatory approval will be a mere formality, without undertaking rigorous internal compliance checks, demonstrates a lack of diligence and an underestimation of the regulatory scrutiny applied to new telecommunications offerings. This can result in unexpected delays or outright rejection of the service, impacting business timelines and investment. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This framework should include 1. Identifying all applicable Chinese telecommunications laws, regulations, and guidelines. 2. Assessing the potential impact of the new service on each regulatory requirement. 3. Consulting with legal and compliance experts specializing in Chinese telecommunications law. 4. Developing mitigation strategies for identified risks. And 5. Seeking formal clarification or approval from relevant regulatory bodies where ambiguity exists or novel issues arise. Prioritizing proactive compliance over reactive problem-solving is crucial. Question 7. Strategic planning requires a comprehensive understanding of the operating environment. For a telecommunications company like China Mobile, how should the company approach the integration of new foreign technologies and partnerships to ensure compliance with China's evolving regulatory framework, particularly concerning data security and national interests? Option A. Focus solely on the technical merits and cost-effectiveness of foreign technologies, deferring detailed regulatory review until potential issues arise during operational implementation. Option B. Rely on the discretion of foreign partners to ensure their compliance with Chinese regulations without conducting independent verification or internal assessments. Option C. Proactively engage with Chinese regulatory bodies. Conduct thorough legal and compliance due diligence on all foreign partners and technologies, and ensure strict adherence to data localization and cross-border data transfer regulations as stipulated by Chinese law. Option D. Prioritize rapid market penetration and technological advancement by adopting international best practices, assuming that compliance with global standards will satisfy Chinese regulatory requirements? The correct answer is C. Proactively engage with Chinese regulatory bodies, conduct thorough legal and compliance due diligence on all foreign partners and technologies, and ensure strict adherence to data localization and cross-border data transfer regulations as stipulated by Chinese law. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in balancing competitive market positioning with adherence to China's regulatory framework governing telecommunications and data security. China Mobile, as a state-controlled enterprise and a major player, must navigate stringent regulations designed to protect national security, consumer data, and promote fair competition. The challenge lies in developing a strategic plan that leverages technological advancements and market opportunities without inadvertently violating these complex and evolving rules. Careful judgment is required to interpret the spirit and letter of the law, especially concerning cross-border data flows and the use of foreign technology. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a thorough understanding and proactive integration of China's regulatory landscape into the strategic planning process. This involves consulting with legal and compliance experts specializing in Chinese telecommunications law, data protection e.g., cybersecurity law, data security law, personal information protection law, and foreign investment regulations. It means conducting rigorous due diligence on any proposed partnerships or technology acquisitions to ensure compliance with national security reviews and data localization requirements. This approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes legal and ethical conduct, mitigates significant legal and reputational risks, and ensures the long-term sustainability of China Mobile's operations within the permitted legal boundaries. It demonstrates a commitment to responsible corporate citizenship and adherence to the rule of law in China. Incorrect approach is analysis. An approach that prioritizes rapid market expansion and technological adoption without adequate regulatory scrutiny risks significant legal repercussions. For instance, failing to conduct proper due diligence on foreign technology suppliers could lead to violations of national security regulations, resulting in hefty fines, operational disruptions, or even bans on the technology. Similarly, neglecting data localization requirements or cross-border data transfer restrictions under China's data protection laws could expose the company to severe penalties and damage customer trust. An approach that assumes existing international best practices are sufficient without adapting them to China's specific legal context is also flawed. This could lead to non-compliance with unique Chinese regulations concerning content moderation, network access, or the handling of sensitive national data. Such failures represent a disregard for the sovereign regulatory authority of China and a lack of professional diligence. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based, compliance-first mindset. The decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying all relevant Chinese regulations pertaining to the strategic initiative. 2. Engaging internal and external legal and compliance counsel with expertise in Chinese telecommunications and data law. 3. Conducting comprehensive risk assessments, including legal, operational, and reputational risks associated with noncompliance. 4. Developing mitigation strategies that align with regulatory requirements. 5. Establishing robust internal controls and monitoring mechanisms to ensure ongoing compliance. 6. Fostering a culture of compliance throughout the organization. Question 8. Governance review demonstrates that China Mobile is considering the rapid deployment of a new AI-driven customer service platform. This platform will process a significant volume of user data, including personal identifiers and interaction history, to provide personalized support. While the platform promises enhanced customer experience and operational efficiency, concerns have been raised regarding the potential for data privacy breaches and non-compliance with China's data protection regulations. Which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory requirements and professional best practices for managing the risks associated with this new AI platform? Option A. Rely exclusively on the AI vendor's internal security certifications and audits, without conducting any independent verification or risk assessment of the platform's data handling capabilities. Option B. Deploy the AI platform with only basic, generic security protocols, focusing on the AI's functionality and assuming that standard IT security practices will be sufficient to protect user data. Option C. Proceed with the immediate launch of the AI platform to gain a competitive advantage, assuming the AI vendor has implemented adequate security measures, and address any potential data privacy issues reactively. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive pre-deployment assessment of data privacy and security risks. Identify specific data types and processing activities. Implement robust technical and organizational safeguards aligned with the cybersecurity law and personal information protection law, and establish ongoing monitoring. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the immediate launch of the AI platform to gain a competitive advantage, assuming the AI vendor has implemented adequate security measures, and address any potential data privacy issues reactively. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between rapid technological advancement and the need for robust data privacy and security, particularly within a telecommunications giant like China Mobile. The rapid deployment of new services, while crucial for market competitiveness, can outpace the thoroughness of risk assessments and the implementation of comprehensive compliance measures. The challenge lies in balancing innovation with the absolute priority of protecting user data and adhering to China's stringent data protection regulations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a proactive and integrated risk management framework. This involves conducting a thorough, pre-deployment assessment of potential data privacy and security risks associated with the new AI-driven customer service platform. It necessitates identifying specific data types to be processed, understanding the AI's learning mechanisms and potential for bias or unauthorized data inference, and ensuring that data minimization principles are applied. Crucially, it requires the implementation of robust technical and organizational measures, including encryption, access controls, and regular security audits, all aligned with the Cybersecurity Law of the People's Republic of China, CSL, and the Personal Information Protection Law of the People's Republic of China, PIPL. This approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes compliance and risk mitigation from the outset, preventing potential breaches and regulatory penalties, and fostering user trust. It aligns with the PIPL requirements for data processing impact assessments and the CSL's mandates for network security. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves prioritizing immediate market launch over comprehensive risk assessment. This fails to comply with the PIPL requirement for conducting a personal information protection impact assessment before processing sensitive personal information or processing personal information on a large scale. It creates a significant regulatory and ethical failure by exposing user data to unknown risks and potentially violating principles of data minimization and purpose limitation. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on the AI vendor's assurances regarding data security without independent verification. This demonstrates a failure to exercise due diligence and uphold the responsibility of data controllers under Chinese law. The CSL and PIPL place the onus on China Mobile to ensure the security of user data, regardless of whether it is handled by a third party. This approach risks significant regulatory penalties and reputational damage if the vendor's assurances prove inadequate. A third incorrect approach is to implement basic, generic security measures without a specific assessment of the AI platform's unique vulnerabilities. This overlooks the specific risks posed by AI, such as algorithmic bias, data inference, and potential for unauthorized learning from sensitive data. It fails to meet the standard of necessary and appropriate measures required by Chinese data protection laws, which demand a risk-based approach tailored to the specific technology and data involved. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based, compliance-first mindset. This involves a structured decision-making process. First, thoroughly understanding the regulatory landscape, CSL, PIPL, etc. Second, conducting a detailed impact assessment for any new technology or service that handles personal information. Third, designing and implementing controls that are proportionate to the identified risks. And fourth, establishing ongoing monitoring and review mechanisms to adapt to evolving threats and regulatory requirements. This systematic approach ensures that innovation is pursued responsibly and ethically, safeguarding both the company and its users. Question 9. Implementation of a new AI-powered customer service chatbot by China Mobile requires careful consideration of data privacy and cybersecurity. Which of the following approaches best ensures compliance with China's regulatory framework for handling user data? Option A. Rely on the chatbot's internal algorithms to automatically anonymize all user data, without a formal assessment of the anonymization process's effectiveness or compliance with legal requirements. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive data protection impact assessment and cybersecurity risk evaluation before the chatbot is deployed, ensuring all data processing activities align with the cybersecurity law and personal information protection law. Option C. Implement robust technical encryption for all data transmitted and stored by the chatbot, assuming this is sufficient to meet all regulatory obligations. Option D. Deploy the chatbot immediately to gather user feedback and address any identified data security issues retrospectively based on operational experience. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive data protection impact assessment and cybersecurity risk evaluation before the chatbot is deployed, ensuring all data processing activities align with the cybersecurity law and personal information protection law. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in balancing the need for rapid innovation and market responsiveness with the imperative to adhere to China's cybersecurity and data protection regulations. The pressure to deploy new services quickly can lead to overlooking critical compliance steps, potentially exposing the company to significant legal and reputational risks. Careful judgment is required to integrate compliance seamlessly into the development lifecycle rather than treating it as an afterthought. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes proactive compliance by integrating data security and privacy impact assessments early in the product development lifecycle. This aligns with the principles of China's cybersecurity law, CSL, and the Personal Information Protection Law, PIPL, which mandate that organizations implement measures to prevent data leakage, unauthorized access, and other security risks. Conducting these assessments before deployment allows for the identification and mitigation of potential compliance gaps, ensuring that new services meet regulatory requirements from inception. This proactive stance minimizes the risk of post-deployment remediation, which is often more costly and disruptive. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves prioritizing speed of deployment over regulatory review, assuming that existing compliance frameworks will automatically cover new services. This fails to acknowledge that novel services may introduce new data processing activities or collect new types of personal information that require specific risk assessments under PIPL. It represents a failure to conduct due diligence and a potential violation of the principle of lawful, legitimate, and necessary data processing. Another incorrect approach is to conduct a superficial review of data handling practices, focusing only on obvious data breaches rather than broader compliance with consent, purpose limitation, and data minimization principles. This overlooks the detailed requirements of PIPL regarding the collection, use, and storage of personal information, and the need for clear consent mechanisms. It demonstrates a lack of understanding of the comprehensive nature of data protection regulations. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on technical security measures without addressing the legal and organizational aspects of data protection. While technical safeguards are crucial, PIPL also requires clear policies, employee training, and mechanisms for handling data subject rights. This approach neglects the holistic requirements of data protection law, which encompasses both technical and non-technical controls. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach to compliance, integrating regulatory considerations into every stage of product development. This involves establishing clear internal processes for cybersecurity and data protection reviews, fostering collaboration between technical, legal, and compliance teams, and staying updated on evolving regulatory interpretations and guidance from Chinese authorities. When faced with pressure to accelerate deployment, professionals must advocate for the necessary time and resources to ensure compliance, framing it not as a barrier to innovation, but as a fundamental enabler of sustainable business growth and trust. Question 10. The evaluation methodology shows that when considering the integration of a new AI-powered customer service chatbot for China Mobile, a key consideration is the balance between rapid service enhancement and adherence to data protection regulations. Which of the following approaches best reflects the mandated regulatory framework for handling user data in such a scenario? Option A. Proceed with immediate deployment to gain a competitive advantage, addressing any data privacy concerns through post-deployment updates and user notifications. Option B. Focus on collecting as much user data as possible through the chatbot to improve its AI model, with the understanding that data anonymization will be applied at a later stage. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive data privacy and security risk assessment, ensuring compliance with China's cybersecurity law and personal information protection law, and implement necessary safeguards before full service rollout. Option D. Prioritize the chatbot's functionality and user experience, assuming that standard security protocols are sufficient and that regulatory compliance can be managed reactively. Correct answer is A. Proceed with immediate deployment to gain a competitive advantage, addressing any data privacy concerns through post-deployment updates and user notifications. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between rapid technological adoption and the need for robust data privacy and security, particularly within the context of China Mobile's operations. The pressure to innovate and deploy new services quickly can sometimes overshadow the meticulous adherence to regulatory frameworks designed to protect user data. Careful judgment is required to balance these competing demands, ensuring that innovation does not come at the expense of compliance and user trust. The correct approach, which prioritizes a thorough risk assessment and compliance review before full deployment, represents best professional practice. This aligns with the principles embedded in China's cybersecurity law, CSL, and the Personal Information Protection Law, PIPL. Specifically, these laws mandate that organizations implement measures to prevent data leakage, unauthorized access, and misuse of personal information. A proactive risk assessment ensures that potential vulnerabilities are identified and mitigated before they can be exploited, thereby safeguarding user data and maintaining regulatory compliance. This approach demonstrates a commitment to responsible data handling and builds trust with customers and regulators. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the speed of market entry without adequate data privacy and security checks fails to uphold the spirit and letter of China's data protection laws. The CSL and PIPL impose significant obligations on network operators like China Mobile to protect user data and national security. Ignoring these requirements can lead to severe penalties, including fines, suspension of services, and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach, which relies on post-deployment patching and reactive measures, is insufficient. While patching is necessary, it is a reactive strategy that assumes a breach or vulnerability has already occurred or is imminent. This approach is inherently riskier and less compliant than a proactive, preventative stance mandated by the regulatory framework. It suggests a lack of foresight and a disregard for the potential harm to users and the organization. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, clearly identify the regulatory obligations relevant to the new technology or service, referencing specific articles within the CSL and PIPL. Second, conduct a comprehensive data privacy and security risk assessment, involving relevant technical and legal teams. Third, develop and implement mitigation strategies based on the assessment findings. Fourth, obtain necessary approvals from internal compliance and legal departments before proceeding with deployment. Finally, establish ongoing monitoring and review mechanisms to ensure continued compliance as the technology evolves and new threats emerge. Question 11. The audit findings indicate that a senior manager in China Mobile's Network Infrastructure Division has been regularly attending exclusive golf outings and receiving expensive gifts from a key vendor that is currently bidding on a significant network upgrade contract. The manager has not disclosed these interactions to the company's compliance department. What is the most appropriate course of action for the manager to take immediately upon learning of these audit findings? Option A. Continue with the vendor selection process as planned, assuming the vendor's long-standing relationship and perceived value to China Mobile will justify any perceived preferential treatment. Option B. Immediately report the nature and extent of the interactions with the vendor to the designated compliance officer and recuse oneself from all aspects of the vendor selection process for the network upgrade contract. Option C. Discreetly inform the vendor that their gifts and invitations are becoming problematic and suggest they see such overtures, without involving China Mobile's compliance department. Option D. Accept a small, symbolic gift from the vendor as a gesture of goodwill to maintain a positive working relationship, while assuring oneself that it will not influence any decisions. Correct answer is B. Immediately report the nature and extent of the interactions with the vendor to the designated compliance officer, and recuse oneself from all aspects of the vendor selection process for the network upgrade contract. Explanation: the audit findings indicate a potential conflict of interest within China Mobile's procurement department. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a delicate balance between fostering business relationships and upholding ethical standards and regulatory compliance. The pressure to secure favorable deals can sometimes blur the lines of acceptable conduct, necessitating a clear understanding of internal policies and relevant regulations governing commercial dealings. The correct approach, which involves reporting the potential conflict to the designated compliance officer and recusing oneself from further involvement in the vendor selection process, represents best professional practice. This aligns with the principles of transparency, integrity, and accountability mandated by China Mobile's internal code of conduct and general principles of corporate governance in China. Such a process ensures that vendor selection is based on merit and objective criteria, free from undue influence, thereby safeguarding the company's financial interests and reputation. It also demonstrates adherence to the spirit of regulations aimed at preventing corruption and unfair competition. An incorrect approach of overlooking the situation due to the vendor's long-standing relationship and perceived value to the company is a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This inaction could be construed as complicity in potential misconduct, violating the duty of loyalty owed to China Mobile. It undermines the integrity of the procurement process and exposes the company to risks of substandard products or services, inflated costs, and reputational damage. Furthermore, it disregards the company's internal policies designed to prevent conflicts of interest and could potentially contravene broader anti-corruption laws if such relationships lead to preferential treatment. Another incorrect approach, that of directly confronting the vendor and attempting to resolve the issue independently without involving the compliance department, is also professionally unacceptable. This bypasses established internal control mechanisms and could lead to an incomplete or biased resolution. It fails to provide the necessary oversight and documentation that a formal reporting channel ensures, potentially leaving the company vulnerable. This approach also risks escalating the situation inappropriately or creating further complications without proper guidance. A third incorrect approach, which is to accept a small token of appreciation from the vendor as a gesture of goodwill, represents a clear ethical lapse and potential regulatory violation. Even seemingly minor gifts can be perceived as attempts to influence decision-making, creating a conflict of interest. Accepting such tokens, especially when a procurement decision is pending, directly contravenes policies on gifts and entertainment and can erode trust in the fairness of the procurement process. It opens the door to accusations of favorability and can be a slippery slope towards more significant ethical breaches. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic approach. First, recognize and acknowledge the potential ethical or regulatory issue. Second, consult relevant internal policies and codes of conduct. Third, report the concern through the designated channels, such as the compliance department or a supervisor, without delay. Fourth, cooperate fully with any subsequent investigation or review. Finally, maintain objectivity and prioritize the company's best interests and regulatory compliance above personal relationships or perceived immediate benefits. Question 12. The efficiency study reveals that streamlining customer service response protocols by automating certain data retrieval processes could significantly reduce average handling times. However, these proposed automated processes involve accessing a broader range of customer data than is currently permitted under existing internal guidelines for frontline staff, though the data itself is collected and stored by China Mobile. Which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory requirements and professional best practices for China Mobile employees? Option A. Implement the automated data retrieval processes immediately to achieve the projected efficiency gains, assuming that since China Mobile already possesses the data, its internal retrieval for service purposes is permissible. Option B. Modify the efficiency study's recommendations to exclude any access to customer data beyond what is currently permitted, thereby sacrificing potential efficiency gains to maintain strict adherence to existing protocols. Option C. Halt any consideration of the efficiency study's recommendations until a comprehensive review of all national telecommunications laws and China Mobile's internal data handling policies is completed, even if it means delaying potential service improvements. Option D. Propose the automated data retrieval processes to the legal and compliance departments for a thorough review against China Mobile's data privacy policies and relevant national regulations, seeking their guidance on any necessary adjustments or approvals before implementation. The correct answer is A. Implement the automated data retrieval processes immediately to achieve the projected efficiency gains, assuming that since China Mobile already possesses the data, its internal retrieval for service purposes is permissible. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in balancing the pursuit of operational efficiency with the imperative of adhering to China Mobile's internal guidelines and relevant telecommunications regulations. The core difficulty lies in interpreting and applying the customer centricity principle in a way that doesn't inadvertently lead to non-compliance or ethical breaches, particularly concerning data privacy and service quality standards. The pressure to demonstrate tangible efficiency gains can create a temptation to overlook subtle regulatory nuances or internal policy requirements. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a thorough understanding and application of China Mobile's established service quality standards and data privacy policies, as well as relevant national telecommunications regulations. This demonstrates a commitment to both operational improvement and regulatory compliance. By seeking clarification from the legal department and ensuring all proposed changes are vetted against existing frameworks, the individual upholds professional integrity and mitigates risks of non-compliance. This aligns with the ethical obligation to conduct business responsibly and protect customer interests, which is a cornerstone of regulatory frameworks governing telecommunications providers in China. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves prioritizing the efficiency gains identified in the study without adequately assessing their impact on customer data privacy. This could lead to violations of the cybersecurity law of the People's Republic of China and the Personal Information Protection Law, which mandates strict controls over the collection, use, and storage of personal information. Another incorrect approach is to implement changes based solely on the efficiency study's recommendations without consulting internal policy or seeking legal review. This bypasses established governance procedures and risks introducing practices that are inconsistent with China Mobile's operational standards or regulatory obligations, potentially leading to service degradation or customer dissatisfaction, which would contradict the spirit of customer centricity. A third incorrect approach is to dismiss the study's findings entirely due to a perceived conflict with existing processes, without exploring potential avenues for compliant innovation. This demonstrates a lack of proactive problem-solving and a failure to explore how efficiency can be achieved within the regulatory and policy boundaries. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should adopt a structured decision-making process. First, they must thoroughly understand the specific recommendations of the efficiency study. Second, they should cross-reference these recommendations against China Mobile's internal policies, service-level agreements, and relevant national laws and regulations, particularly those pertaining to data privacy and service quality. Third, if any discrepancies or ambiguities arise, they must proactively seek clarification from the appropriate internal departments, such as the legal or compliance team. Finally, any proposed changes should be implemented only after a comprehensive risk assessment and approval process that ensures full adherence to all applicable frameworks. Question 13. Investigation of a junior employee in the customer service department at China Mobile who appears to be accessing customer account details beyond what is necessary for their immediate task, seemingly to identify potential upsell opportunities for their personal sales targets, raising concerns about data privacy and compliance with internal policies. Option A. Confront the junior employee directly to understand their actions and advise them on proper data handling procedures. Option B. Ignore the observation, assuming it is an isolated incident and not a significant breach of protocol. Option C. Immediately report the observed behavior to the company's compliance department and the designated data protection officer for a formal investigation. Option D. Use the observed information to identify other employees who might be engaging in similar practices before reporting. Correct answer is C. Immediately report the observed behavior to the company's compliance department and the designated data protection officer for a formal investigation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge involving the potential misuse of customer data within China Mobile. The core difficulty lies in balancing the company's operational needs with the stringent data privacy regulations mandated by Chinese law. Employees may be tempted to leverage customer information for personal gain or to expedite internal processes, but such actions carry significant legal and ethical risks. Careful judgment is required to identify and address such potential breaches proactively, ensuring compliance and maintaining customer trust. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves immediately escalating the observed behavior to the relevant internal compliance department and the data protection officer. This aligns with the principles of data governance and privacy outlined in China's cybersecurity law, CSL, and the Personal Information Protection Law, PIPL. These laws emphasize the responsibility of organizations to implement robust data protection measures, conduct regular audits, and establish clear reporting mechanisms for suspected violations. Prompt escalation ensures that the company can initiate a formal investigation, mitigate potential harm, and take appropriate disciplinary or corrective actions in accordance with legal requirements and internal policies. This demonstrates a commitment to regulatory adherence and ethical conduct. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to ignore the observation, assuming it is a minor or isolated incident. This fails to acknowledge the potential for systemic issues and the severe penalties associated with data privacy violations under PIPL, which can include substantial fines and reputational damage. Ethically, it represents a dereliction of duty to protect customer information. Another incorrect approach is to confront the colleague directly without involving the proper authorities. While well-intentioned, this bypasses established internal procedures and could lead to an incomplete or biased investigation. It also risks creating a hostile work environment and may not result in the necessary corrective actions to prevent future occurrences, potentially violating the spirit of data protection regulations that require formal oversight. A third incorrect approach is to use the observed information to preemptively fix a perceived problem without proper authorization or investigation. This could lead to unauthorized access or modification of data, constituting a breach of data integrity and privacy. It also undermines the established investigative processes and could result in incorrect assumptions and actions, violating the principles of due process and data security mandated by Chinese regulations. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should follow a structured decision-making process. First, recognize the potential regulatory and ethical implications of the observed behavior. Second, consult internal policies and relevant laws, CSL, PIPL, to understand reporting obligations and data protection requirements. Third, escalate the matter through the designated channels, such as the compliance department or data protection officer, providing factual information without speculation. Fourth, cooperate fully with any subsequent investigation and adhere to company directives. This systematic approach ensures accountability, compliance, and the protection of both customer data and the organization's integrity. Question 14. What factors determine the ethical and regulatory permissibility of utilizing aggregated subscriber usage patterns for network optimization strategies within China Mobile? Option A. The potential for increased revenue generation and improved network efficiency, even if some level of individual subscriber behavior can be inferred from the aggregated data. Option B. The extent to which the aggregated data is anonymized and de-identified, ensuring no individual subscriber can be identified, and adherence to China Mobile's internal data governance policies and relevant national telecommunications data regulations. Option C. The perceived technical feasibility of collecting and analyzing the data without a primary focus on the legal and ethical implications of subscriber data usage. Option D. The speed at which the optimization strategy can be implemented to gain a competitive advantage, with a secondary consideration for data privacy if significant public backlash is anticipated. The correct answer is B. The extent to which the aggregated data is anonymized and de-identified, ensuring no individual subscriber can be identified, and adherence to China Mobile's internal data governance policies and relevant national telecommunications data regulations. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge, because it requires balancing the company's strategic objectives with the ethical considerations of data privacy and compliance with China Mobile's internal policies and relevant national regulations concerning telecommunications data. The pressure to achieve business goals must not override the fundamental responsibility to protect customer information and adhere to legal frameworks. Careful judgment is required to navigate potential conflicts between commercial interests and regulatory obligations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough understanding and adherence to China Mobile's established data governance policies and the relevant national laws governing telecommunications data. This includes ensuring that any data utilization for strategic planning is anonymized, aggregated, and used in a manner that strictly prohibits the identification of individual subscribers, thereby upholding customer privacy and complying with the spirit and letter of regulations like the Cybersecurity Law of the People's Republic of China and the Personal Information Protection Law. This approach demonstrates a commitment to responsible data stewardship and risk mitigation. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on maximizing subscriber engagement without explicit consideration for data privacy safeguards would represent a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This could lead to violations of data protection laws, resulting in severe penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. Another incorrect approach that involves using granular subscriber data for targeted marketing without proper consent mechanisms or anonymization would also be a direct contravention of privacy regulations and internal ethical guidelines. Furthermore, an approach that bypasses established data access protocols or seeks to acquire data through unauthorized channels would constitute a severe breach of internal policy and potentially illegal activity. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a multifaceted approach. First, clearly identifying the business objective. Second, thoroughly reviewing all applicable internal policies and external regulations related to data handling and privacy. Third, consulting with legal and compliance departments to ensure any proposed strategy is fully compliant. Fourth, evaluating potential risks and developing mitigation strategies. And finally, implementing the strategy with robust oversight and regular audits to ensure ongoing adherence to ethical and regulatory standards. Question 15. When evaluating the potential use of customer call records and location data for internal network performance analysis and service improvement initiatives, what is the most compliant and ethically sound approach for a China Mobile employee? Option A. Anonymize or pseudonymize all customer data before analysis and ensure that any use of personal information beyond the primary purpose of service provision is supported by explicit customer consent obtained in accordance with PIPL. Option B. Utilize aggregated data that is already publicly available from third-party sources for network analysis, rather than accessing China Mobile's internal customer databases. Option C. Rely on existing internal guidelines that permit access to customer data for operational efficiency without seeking explicit consent for each analytical use case. Option D. Access and analyze raw customer data directly, assuming that improving network performance ultimately benefits the customer and falls within the scope of service provision. The correct answer is D. Access and analyze raw customer data directly, assuming that improving network performance ultimately benefits the customer and falls within the scope of service provision. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to data privacy and compliance within the context of China Mobile's operations. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for internal data analysis to improve service quality with the stringent requirements of China's cybersecurity and data protection laws. Employees may be tempted to access or use customer data for perceived efficiency gains without fully understanding or adhering to the legal boundaries, creating a risk of both regulatory penalties and reputational damage for China Mobile. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all data handling practices are compliant and ethically sound. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves strictly adhering to China's cybersecurity law (CSL) and the Personal Information Protection Law (PIPL). This means that any access to or processing of customer data for internal analysis must be anonymized or pseudonymized where possible, and explicit consent must be obtained for any use of personal information beyond the primary purpose of service provision. Furthermore, internal policies and training must be robust to ensure employees understand these legal obligations and the specific procedures for lawful data access and utilization. This approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes legal compliance and customer trust, which are fundamental to sustainable business operations in the telecommunications sector. It directly aligns with the principles of data minimization, purpose limitation, and lawful basis for processing mandated by Chinese regulations. Incorrect approach is analysis, an approach that involves accessing raw customer data without anonymization or explicit consent for internal analysis, even if for service improvement, constitutes a direct violation of PIPL. PIPL mandates that personal information shall be processed lawfully, legitimately, and with necessity, and that consent is a primary legal basis for processing. Failure to obtain consent or to adequately anonymize data when using it for secondary purposes like internal analysis is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Another incorrect approach would be to rely solely on internal company policies without ensuring they are fully aligned with the CSL and PIPL. While internal policies are important, they cannot supersede statutory requirements. If a policy permits data access that is not legally permissible under Chinese law, it creates a compliance gap and exposes the company to penalties. This represents an ethical failure in due diligence and a regulatory failure in implementing effective compliance mechanisms. A third incorrect approach might be to assume that data collected for service provision automatically allows for any form of internal analysis without further consideration. This overlooks the principle of purpose limitation, which is a cornerstone of data protection laws. Data collected for one specific purpose cannot be freely repurposed for other, unrelated internal analyses without a valid legal basis, such as consent or legitimate interest, carefully assessed against the rights of the data subject. This is a regulatory failure in understanding the scope of data processing rights. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach to data handling. This involves first identifying all potential data processing activities, then assessing the legal basis for each activity under CSL and PIPL, and finally implementing appropriate technical and organizational measures to ensure compliance. This includes robust data governance frameworks, regular employee training on data protection laws and internal policies, and mechanisms for auditing data access and usage. When in doubt about the legality or ethicality of a data processing activity, professionals should consult with legal and compliance experts within China Mobile to ensure adherence to all applicable regulations. Question 16. The monitoring system demonstrates an unusual spike in data traffic originating from a specific user group, potentially indicating a security vulnerability or unauthorized activity. As a network engineer, you are tasked with investigating this anomaly. Which of the following actions best aligns with regulatory requirements and professional best practices for China Mobile? Option A. Escalate the alert to the internal cybersecurity team for a formal investigation, providing them with the initial monitoring data and requesting adherence to established data handling protocols. Option B. Immediately initiate a detailed forensic analysis of the raw data packets from the affected user group to identify the source and nature of the traffic. Option C. Temporarily block all network access for the affected user group until the anomaly is fully understood to prevent any potential damage. Option D. Review the anomaly report, and if the traffic volume is not excessively high, decide to monitor it passively without further immediate action. Correct answer is B. Immediately initiate a detailed forensic analysis of the raw data packets from the affected user group to identify the source and nature of the traffic. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between maintaining network performance and adhering to data privacy regulations. The need to identify and mitigate potential security threats must be balanced against the obligation to protect user data from unauthorized access or disclosure. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any data analysis performed is both effective in its purpose and compliant with the relevant legal and ethical standards. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic, authorized, and privacy-preserving method for addressing the detected anomaly. By initiating an internal investigation through the designated security team and adhering to established protocols for data access and analysis, the company upholds its commitment to regulatory compliance and user trust. This process ensures that any data examined is done so under strict controls, with clear objectives, and with appropriate safeguards in place to prevent misuse or breaches. This aligns with the principles of data minimization and purpose limitation, fundamental to data protection laws. An incorrect approach that involves directly accessing and analyzing raw user data without proper authorization or a defined investigative scope would constitute a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This could violate provisions related to unauthorized access to information and data privacy, potentially leading to severe penalties. Another incorrect approach, such as ignoring the alert due to its perceived low impact, would be a failure in due diligence and risk management, potentially exposing the company to security vulnerabilities and reputational damage. Furthermore, a failure to document the investigation and its findings would hinder accountability and future audits, also representing a lapse in professional practice and regulatory adherence. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the nature of the alert and its potential implications. This involves consulting internal policies and procedures, identifying the relevant regulatory requirements, and engaging the appropriate internal stakeholders, e.g., security, legal, compliance. The process should then involve a risk assessment to determine the urgency and scope of the response. Any data analysis must be conducted with a clear, documented purpose, adhering to the principles of necessity and proportionality, and with robust technical and organizational measures to protect data privacy. Transparency and accountability throughout the process are paramount. Question 17. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of a data breach if a new third-party analytics service is integrated without a full security audit. The proposed service promises significant improvements in customer service efficiency for China Mobile. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance with China's cybersecurity and data privacy regulations? Option A. Delay the integration indefinitely until absolute certainty of zero risk is achieved, even if it means missing out on potential efficiency gains. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive, independent security audit and data privacy impact assessment of the third-party service before proceeding with integration, and ensure contractual clauses address data protection and breach notification. Option C. Proceed with the integration after obtaining a written assurance from the vendor that they comply with all relevant Chinese data protection laws. Option D. Integrate the service immediately to gain the efficiency benefits, and address any potential data security issues reactively if they arise. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the integration after obtaining a written assurance from the vendor that they comply with all relevant Chinese data protection laws. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate a situation where a potential conflict of interest could arise, impacting the integrity of China Mobile's operations and customer data. The core of the challenge lies in balancing business development opportunities with the stringent requirements of data privacy and security regulations applicable to telecommunications companies in China. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any partnership or service integration adheres strictly to legal mandates and ethical standards, preventing unauthorized access or misuse of sensitive customer information. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough, risk-based assessment aligned with China's cybersecurity and data protection laws. This involves proactively identifying potential vulnerabilities, understanding the scope of data processing, and ensuring that any third-party vendor or partner meets China Mobile's rigorous security standards and complies with all relevant regulations, such as the Cybersecurity Law of the People's Republic of China and the Personal Information Protection Law of the People's Republic of China. This demonstrates a commitment to safeguarding customer data and maintaining regulatory compliance, which is paramount for a telecommunications provider. An incorrect approach that involves proceeding with the integration without a comprehensive security audit and data privacy impact assessment is professionally unacceptable. This failure constitutes a direct violation of regulatory requirements designed to protect personal information and national cybersecurity. It exposes China Mobile to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. Another incorrect approach, such as relying solely on the vendor's self-assessment without independent verification, also represents a regulatory and ethical failure. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and an abdication of responsibility for ensuring compliance, which is a critical function within any regulated entity. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the regulatory landscape. This involves identifying all applicable laws and guidelines related to data security, privacy, and third-party risk management. Next, a comprehensive risk assessment should be conducted, specifically focusing on the proposed integration and the potential impact on customer data. This assessment should involve relevant internal stakeholders, including legal, compliance, and IT security teams. Finally, decisions should be made based on a clear evaluation of whether the proposed action aligns with regulatory mandates and ethical obligations, with a bias towards caution and robust protective measures when in doubt. Question 18. The control framework reveals that a new AI-powered customer service chatbot is being developed to enhance user experience and reduce operational costs. However, the development team has bypassed the standard internal review process for new technology adoption, citing the urgency to deploy the chatbot before a competitor launches a similar service. The team has also not explicitly documented how customer data will be handled by the AI, nor have they consulted with the legal and compliance departments regarding potential data privacy implications under Chinese regulations. What is the most appropriate course of action for a responsible employee observing this situation? Option A. Immediately escalate the concerns to senior management and the internal audit department, providing details of the bypassed review process and potential compliance risks. Option B. Advise the development team to quickly add some generic privacy statements to the chatbot's interface without further formal review. Option C. Proceed with the deployment of the chatbot as planned, assuming that the development team has considered all necessary compliance aspects. Option D. Focus on the potential competitive advantage and encourage the development team to prioritize speed over detailed compliance checks at this stage. The correct answer is A. Immediately escalate the concerns to senior management and the internal audit department, providing details of the bypassed review process and potential compliance risks. Explanation. The control framework reveals a common challenge in large organizations: the tension between rapid innovation and robust compliance. In the context of China Mobile's hiring assessment, this scenario tests a candidate's understanding of internal control principles and their application in a dynamic business environment. The professional challenge lies in balancing the need to adopt new technologies and processes to maintain market competitiveness, with the imperative to adhere to established internal policies and regulatory requirements designed to mitigate risks. A candidate must demonstrate an ability to identify potential control weaknesses and propose solutions that are both effective and compliant. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic and documented process for evaluating and implementing new initiatives. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and internal control, which emphasize risk assessment, policy adherence, and continuous improvement. Specifically, it reflects the importance of understanding the potential impact of new technologies on data security, customer privacy, and operational integrity, all of which are critical considerations for a telecommunications giant like China Mobile. By engaging relevant stakeholders and seeking formal approval, this approach ensures that innovation is pursued responsibly and within the established risk appetite of the organization, thereby safeguarding against potential regulatory breaches and reputational damage. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate business benefits without considering the control environment would represent a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This could lead to the adoption of technologies or processes that violate data protection laws, e.g., cybersecurity law of the People's Republic of China, compromise customer information, or create operational vulnerabilities. Another incorrect approach that bypasses established approval channels, even with good intentions, undermines the integrity of the control framework. This can lead to inconsistent application of policies, increased risk of errors, and a perception of a weak control culture, which could attract scrutiny from regulatory bodies and internal audit. A third incorrect approach that dismisses the need for formal risk assessment or documentation demonstrates a lack of diligence and foresight, potentially exposing the company to unforeseen liabilities and operational disruptions. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, clearly define the proposed change and its objectives. Second, conduct a thorough risk assessment, identifying potential control gaps and compliance issues. Third, consult relevant internal policies, procedures, and regulatory guidelines. Fourth, engage with key stakeholders including legal, compliance, IT security, and business units to gather input and ensure alignment. Fifth, develop a mitigation plan for identified risks and seek formal approval through the appropriate channels. Finally, ensure that the implementation is monitored and that controls are continuously reviewed and updated. Question 19. The assessment process reveals that a new marketing initiative requires the analysis of customer interaction data. While the internal guidelines for data usage are generally understood, there is a specific clause regarding the anonymization of user data that appears open to interpretation regarding the level of detail that must be removed to be considered truly anonymized under China Mobile's operational framework. Candidate is asked to propose a course of action for proceeding with the data analysis. Option A. Proceed with the data analysis using the most permissive interpretation of the anonymization clause to ensure the marketing initiative can be launched without delay. Option B. Conduct the data analysis using the current level of data detail, assuming that the data is sufficiently anonymized for the marketing initiative's purposes without further consultation. Option C. Consult with the internal compliance and legal departments to seek clarification on the anonymization requirements and document the agreed-upon approach before proceeding with the data analysis. Option D. Immediately cease all data analysis related to the marketing initiative due to the ambiguity in the guidelines, as any action could lead to regulatory noncompliance. The correct answer is C. Consult with the internal compliance and legal departments to seek clarification on the anonymization requirements and document the agreed-upon approach before proceeding with the data analysis. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in regulatory compliance within the telecommunications sector, specifically concerning data privacy and security. The professional is tasked with balancing the company's operational needs with the stringent requirements of data protection laws. The challenge lies in interpreting vague guidelines, assessing potential risks, and making a decision that upholds both business objectives and legal obligations, all while operating under the specific regulatory framework of China Mobile's hiring assessment. The pressure to demonstrate a thorough understanding of these regulations without overstepping boundaries or creating unnecessary compliance burdens requires careful judgment. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive and documented engagement with the relevant internal compliance department and legal counsel. This is best professional practice because it ensures that any decision regarding data handling is made with expert guidance, minimizing the risk of regulatory violation. Specifically, under the framework governing China Mobile's operations, adherence to data privacy regulations, such as those derived from China's cybersecurity law and personal information protection law, is paramount. Consulting with the compliance department ensures that the proposed data usage aligns with internal policies and external legal mandates. Documenting this consultation and the subsequent decision provides an audit trail, demonstrating due diligence and good faith in complying with regulations. This approach prioritizes a thorough understanding of the legal implications before implementation, thereby safeguarding both the company and the individuals whose data is involved. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the data analysis without seeking clarification or approval from the compliance department. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure because it bypasses established internal controls designed to ensure compliance with data protection laws. It demonstrates a disregard for the established governance framework and increases the likelihood of inadvertently violating data privacy regulations, leading to potential fines, reputational damage, and legal repercussions for China Mobile. Another incorrect approach is to interpret the guidelines in the most permissive way possible to facilitate immediate business needs, without considering potential privacy implications or seeking expert advice. This approach is ethically unsound and legally risky. It prioritizes expediency over responsibility, potentially exposing the company to breaches of data privacy laws by assuming data can be used freely without proper safeguards or consent mechanisms, which are critical components of data protection frameworks in China. A third incorrect approach is to abandon the data analysis entirely due to perceived ambiguity, without attempting to seek clarification or explore alternative, compliant methods. While caution is important, An outright refusal to engage with potentially valuable data without due diligence can hinder business objectives and demonstrate a lack of problem-solving initiative. The failure here is not in caution, but in the lack of proactive engagement to find a compliant solution, which is expected of a professional. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this context should adopt a risk-based approach. When faced with ambiguity in regulatory guidelines, the first step is to identify the potential risks associated with different interpretations and actions. This should be followed by seeking clarification from the appropriate internal stakeholders, such as the compliance or legal departments. Documenting all communications and decisions is crucial for accountability and audit purposes. If a compliant path forward cannot be immediately identified, the professional should explore alternative, less risky methods or propose modifications to the original plan that align with regulatory requirements. The ultimate goal is to achieve business objectives in a manner that is fully compliant with all applicable laws and ethical standards. Question 20. What factors determine the most effective strategy for optimizing network performance and operational efficiency within China Mobile's regulatory framework? Option A. A data-driven approach that analyzes current performance metrics, identifies bottlenecks through real-time monitoring, and employs agile methodologies for iterative improvements, ensuring alignment with regulatory service standards and customer experience. Option B. Implementing the latest available technologies without extensive testing to ensure the network is always cutting edge, regardless of immediate operational impact. Option C. Focusing solely on reducing operational costs by cutting back on maintenance and support staff to maximize short-term financial gains. Option D. Responding to network issues only after a significant number of customer complaints have been logged, prioritizing immediate problem resolution over proactive optimization. The correct answer is A. A data-driven approach that analyzes current performance metrics, identifies bottlenecks through real-time monitoring, and employs agile methodologies for iterative improvements, ensuring alignment with regulatory service standards and customer experience. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in telecommunications operations, optimizing network performance under increasing demand while adhering to strict service level agreements, SLAs, and regulatory compliance. The challenge lies in balancing resource allocation, technological upgrades, and operational efficiency to meet customer expectations and regulatory mandates without incurring excessive costs or compromising service quality. The pressure to maintain high network availability and data throughput, especially during peak hours, requires a proactive and data-driven approach to process optimization. Failure to do so can lead to customer dissatisfaction, reputational damage, and potential penalties for non-compliance with service standards. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach focuses on a holistic and data-driven methodology for process optimization. This involves a thorough analysis of current network performance metrics, identifying bottlenecks through real-time monitoring and historical data, and leveraging advanced analytics to predict future demand patterns. Implementing agile methodologies for iterative improvements, such as a /B testing of configuration changes and phased rollouts of new technologies, allows for controlled risk and continuous refinement. Collaboration between network engineering, operations, and customer support teams is crucial for understanding the impact of optimization efforts on user experience and for gathering feedback for further adjustments. This approach aligns with the principles of efficient resource management and service quality mandated by telecommunications regulations, ensuring that China Mobile operates within established performance benchmarks and customer service standards. It emphasizes a proactive, adaptive, and customer-centric strategy, which is best professional practice in a dynamic industry. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves solely relying on reactive measures, such as addressing performance issues only when customer complaints arise. This is a failure to adhere to proactive service management principles and can lead to prolonged periods of degraded service, impacting customer loyalty and potentially violating SLA commitments. From a regulatory perspective, it suggests a lack of diligence in maintaining service quality standards. Another incorrect approach is to implement large-scale, untested technological upgrades without pilot programs or phased rollouts. This carries a high risk of introducing new, unforeseen issues that could disrupt service across a broad user base. It demonstrates a disregard for risk management and operational stability, which are critical for maintaining regulatory compliance and customer trust. A third incorrect approach is to prioritize cost reduction over service quality by cutting essential maintenance or operational staff. While cost efficiency is important, compromising the resources necessary to maintain network integrity and responsiveness can lead to a decline in service performance, customer dissatisfaction, and potential regulatory scrutiny for failing to meet service obligations. This approach neglects the fundamental responsibility to provide reliable and high-quality telecommunications services. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach process optimization by first establishing clear performance objectives aligned with business goals and regulatory requirements. This involves defining key performance indicators, KPI, and service level objectives. Slow. The next step is to gather and analyze comprehensive data on current processes and network performance, identifying areas for improvement. This data analysis should inform the selection of optimization strategies, prioritizing those that offer the greatest impact on service quality and efficiency. Implementing changes should be done iteratively and with rigorous testing, using pilot programs and phased rollouts to mitigate risks. Continuous monitoring and feedback loops are essential for evaluating the effectiveness of implemented changes and for making further adjustments. Collaboration across departments ensures a comprehensive understanding of the impact of optimization efforts and fosters a culture of continuous improvement.